Good morning. I want to welcome you to Minnesota Cuba Day. This is a chat with the Cuban Ambassador to the United States and Minnesota leaders, and we're really excited to be able to do this and to have you here with us on this discussion. I wanted to just say that we decided to do this event on Monday evening. I talked with Daniel from the embassy about doing it, and so it's a last minute event. And so I want to really thank all of the speakers today for coming on and being willing to speak at the last minute. But we're so happy that we're here today and that it's all together. So I'm going to first just talk about what the purpose of it is, and then I will talk a little bit about logistics. So after the 20 months of pandemic restrictions, Cuba's reopening now, and they're preparing to ease travel restrictions to the island on November 15th. We thought this would be a good time for Minnesotans to learn about how Cuba is functioning today. And despite the punishing 60-year blockade imposed by the United States, battling COVID and climate change, they are continuing to work toward the betterment of people. Minnesota has long been interested in Cuba. We've had many involvements with Cuba, and many people have traveled there from Minnesota. And we've done amazing things in collaboration around healthcare, around agriculture. The Minnesota Orchestra was the first orchestra to come to Havana and play in Havana, the first major orchestra. We've really had a great people-to-people connection of Minnesotans to Cubans. And so we wanted to share some of that today, and also to talk about that this is a positive thing and Cuba's opening up, that the vaccinations are moving ahead very quickly there. And so travel will be possible very quickly. So this meeting is just an opportunity to build upon all of these efforts. I wanted to mention one thing, in the news this last week, there's been a lot of news about COP26 and about climate change. And one of the highlights at COP26 was the showing of a film about Cuba's efforts at climate change. It's called Cuba's Life Task, and people were trying to get into the room to see it because it was so popular at COP26. And I think the importance of what Cuba is doing on climate change. So I wanted to just start by talking about who I am and the groups that I work with and the other groups in Minnesota. My name is Marcy Shapiro. I'm with the Solidarity Committee on the Americas. We're the host for this event today. We're a group that's in solidarity with people of the Caribbean and Latin America who are working for social justice and equality in their respective countries. And we oppose US interference in these countries. We do a lot of educational events as well as activist events. And we have regular coffee hours that are about different countries. So we thought this is really fitting with our coffee hours because this is about Cuba. There are two other solidarity groups in Minnesota, and I just wanted to recognize them. One is the Minnesota Cuba Committee, and they're committed to the sovereignty of Cuba and the self-determination of its people in the face of US intervention. And they do educational programs and activist work. And Greg Clave, I don't know if you can show him on the screen or not, is here to on behalf of the Minnesota Cuba Committee. Witness for Peace Solidarity Collective is another group, and they support peace, justice, and sustainable economies in the Americas by changing U.S. policies and corporate practices that contribute to poverty and oppression. And they want us to make sure that they have 2 staff in Havana who host their delegations to Cuba, and their staff do connect with people regularly in Cuba. So, and Elise Roberts is, I don't know if she's here, but she's here representing them today. So for this event, we have 16 co-hosts who both locally and nationally who have been sharing information about this event. And I want to especially thank Carla Riuli, who is doing the technology for this event. She's doing both. She has set up both Facebook and also this Zoom call. And so I really want to thank Carla. She's part of the Solidarity Committee. There are a few people that were suggested that I mention are on the call, and one is Carlos Lazo, who's been an important leader in the car caravans. We've done the Minnesota Cuba Committee and the Solidarity Committee have been doing car caravans regularly in Minnesota, and Carlos Lazo was the one who started them in Miami and has been doing them regularly. And he's been doing advocacy with the Biden administration to try to get them to change their policies. So I want to say that in the chat, you can put your questions, and we have 2 members of our committee, Kim DeFranco and Sarah Martin, who will basically screen the calls and ask them. So, but we'll be doing that at the end of the event. And the other thing I wanted to mention is just for the speakers, so they understand that we have a short time. The ambassador has to leave in an hour and a half. And so we're asking speakers to kind of keep their time to about 5 minutes, and I'll maybe interrupt if it feels like you're going to go a lot longer. So otherwise, I think you can decide for yourselves about time. And I think that's all the logistics. Just make sure and type in your questions in the chat if you have them. And the ambassador is really happy to answer them. And all of the people who are speakers also will answer them. And Carla reminded me there's closed captioning on both Zoom and on Facebook for people who need it. So I want to introduce the ambassador, who's going to be our first speaker. Her name is Janice Torres Rivera, and she's the first woman from Cuba to serve as ambassador to the U.S. And she's a recent appointee. I think she started in December of 2020, and before she was ambassador to Cuba, from Cuba, to the United States, she was the ambassador to Vietnam. She was part of the team that helped reopen the bilateral relations under the Obama administration, the bilateral U.S.-Cuba relations. And so she's had a long connection with working on U.S.-Cuba relations. And so I'm really pleased and excited to introduce her and for her to give us her thoughts about Cuba and what's going on in Cuba now. Ambassador, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mercy. Good morning. I would like to begin by thanking the Solidarity Committee on the Americas for sponsoring this event at such an important time for Cuba, as well as those who have collaborated, as Mercy said, in such a short time to put this webinar together. I also deeply appreciate the participation of all panelists who will surely express jointly the whole universe of possibilities for closer relations between Cuba and Minnesota. Humbly, I can share that Cuba is defeating the pandemic. In our case, we have had to face the negative consequences for public health and the economy that have been common to the rest of the countries, in combination with the effects of an intensified US blockade. As you know, the Trump administration put into effect 243 additional measures, more than 60 conceived during the pandemic, which the Biden administration fully continues to implement. We can also say that the unjustified and politically motivated inclusion of Cuba in the State Department list of sponsor of international terrorism, the restrictions on family remittances and travel to Cuba, the persecution of Cuban financial assets abroad, the pressure against our international suppliers, including those who sell Cuba fuel and medical supplies necessary to combat the pandemic, but also the demonization of our international medical brigades are among the most absurd and outrageous punitive measures imposed against Cuba. However, thanks to the heroic resistance of the Cuban people and to a health and scientific system that puts man at the center of its action, Cuba has been able to create 3 vaccines, Soberana O2, Abdala, and Soberana Plus. 2 others and 2 others vaccine candidates, as well as therapies for the prevention and treatment of the disease, which has proven to be highly effective in the epidemiological control. For example, currently 70% of the population, of the Cuban population has been fully vaccinated, and almost 90% of our people has at least 1 dose. Cuba has been the first country to start a vaccination program for minors from 2 years old, which already reaches more than 90% of this group. Consequently, the numbers of daily infection, as you have been seeing, and death has decreased significantly. For example, yesterday, we have 293 positive cases and not a single death in our country for COVID. And the lethality, for example, the lethality rate in Cuba is 0.86% compared to 2.02% in the world and 2.44% in the Americas. And the recovery rate for patients is 98.9%, which is higher than this figure in the rest of the world and in the Americas. That is why the Cuban authorities announced in September this year that as of November 15, Cuba would gradually open its international borders. As part of the new health protocols, the mandatory quarantine requirement is repealed. It will only be necessary to show proof of vaccination or a negative PCR test performed within the last 72 hours prior to enter the country. And it is also important to say that on November the 8th, students from 11 to 17 years old joyfully returned to the classrooms, to the Cuban classrooms. And the small ones I mean, from 5 to 10 years old, will do it next Monday. People began to meet again in public places such as the well-known Havana's seafront, Malecon. Inter-province transportation, economic, cultural, and social activity begins to recover. Cuba returns to normal, or as we say, the new normal. But this optimistic scenario would not have been possible without friends. Cuba sent more than 50 medical brigades to around 40 countries and territories to help fight the pandemic, joining Cuban health personnel previously present in 59 countries. But the achievement of the Cuban biotech and medicine have also benefits population in need around the world. In the same way, we have received and are receiving many expressions of solidarity from governments and people of the world, including the American people. I take this opportunity to thank everyone in Minnesota who worked for the Syringe for Cuba campaign and for the donation that you have sent to Cuba, which contributed to the Cuban vaccination program and contributed also to the fight against the pandemic. And this is not strange, since Cuba and Minnesota have a long history of fruitful and respectful relations and exchanges. First of all, illustrious Cubans have contributed to the social fabric of Minnesota. We could say that Cuban scholars have lectured at Minnesota's universities. For example, several Cuban baseball players have played for the MLB Twins, the Minnesota team, including Hall of Famer Tony Oliva. And of course, the best of Cuban music culture has come to you from the prodigious hands of Nachito Herrera. Cubans like Nachito, his wife Aurora, and Ofunci, also panelists at this event, place the name of Cuba very high in the US. But also, Minnesota representative has visited Cuba seeking business opportunities. We pleasantly remember the visit in 2017 of current US Senator Tina Smith, at that time Lieutenant Governor, along with state officials and agricultural groups, as well as the visit in 2015 of St. Paul's Mayor Chris Coleman, accompanied by business and civic leaders. Federal congressmen from both parties have backed bills to lift travel restrictions to Cuba, for example, for Americans and expand bilateral trade. Cities such as St. Paul and Minneapolis have passed resolutions advocating to lift the so-called embargo on Cuba and expanding cooperation in health. This is an intention also expressed by State Senator Sandy Pappas in her letter to Governor Tim Walz. We believe that the virtual conferences understanding COVID-19 Minnesota-Cuba innovations and research taking place in December 2020 and April 2021 between leaders in public health care and research from the University of Minnesota and Cuba were good starting points that can help us work together to higher goals. The Minnesota agricultural community has been part of a commercial delegation to Cuba and has supported visits by the Cuban embassy official to the state. We always remember that, for which we are very grateful. We invite Minnesota's business sector to participate in the second Cuba Business Forum in 2021 and its first virtual fair from November 29 to December 2nd to identify opportunities that could benefit Minnesota and Cuba. For the first time, we have to say, and it's important to highlight, that this event will include a segment for Cuban citizens living abroad as an expression of the Cuban government's willingness to promote the participation in businesses related to foreign government. Despite the last 2 years of a complex economic situation, Cuba has continued to transform itself based on the goal of building a more just, inclusive, democratic, prosperous, and sustainable society. Part of these changes should facilitate interactions with the US society, including with Cuban Americans. But these intentions and this decision are often hampered by the tight US regulatory framework, which is counterproductive and does not reflect the best values of the American society, nor does it serve the US national interest. Nothing is more opportune and viable than increasing bilateral cooperation in areas of interest between Minnesota and Cuba through the exchange of information, good practices, and technologies. In summary, I emphasize my consideration that Cuba and Minnesota relations offer an example of the kind of constructive and mutually beneficial relationship that the US and Cuba could have. We would like to extend an invitation to celebrate a Cuba-Minnesota Day at the Cuban Embassy when the epidemiological conditions allow. And at the same time, we invite you to visit Cuba now that our borders are open again, and enjoy the background picture that you have been seeing today during this event. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. That was wonderful to hear about, and all the connections to Minnesota that is, I think all of us know about, but it's great to hear about them and to really think about how we relate to Cuba. And also the opening of travel to Cuba is really important. Several of us on this event are going to Cuba in a few weeks, and we're really excited to be able to go back to Cuba for the environment to be, especially with the pandemic, for the environment to be ready to welcome us. So I want to move on to the speakers, and I'm just going to list who they are and the order, and then I'll introduce each speaker. So the speakers are Nachita Herrera, Kevin Papp, Senator Sandy Pappas, Dr. Teddy Potter, Dr. John Oswald, Ofunci Radema, and that's it. So I'm going to start by introducing Nachita Herrera, and since I'm a fan of his, I'm excited to introduce him. I've seen him play many times. Nachita has a PhD in music, piano and orchestra conductor. He teaches classical and jazz music, and he is the first Cuban American to have in Minnesota his own day, and signed by the governor as his contribution to education, diversity, and art. And you can learn more about Nachita at his website, nachitaherrera.com. Nachita survived COVID with the help of Cuban and University of Minnesota doctors. And so that's an important collaboration that happened on an individual basis for him. So I'm going to turn it over to Nachita to give us a few words. Thank you, Nachita.
Hi, Nota. Thank you so much. And good morning to everyone. Buenos dias. We pretty much touched ground very early from California. And but what can I say? It is definitely a pleasure and an honor for me, and obviously for my dear wife, to be here with all of you today. It is glad to see our Cuban ambassador, Lianys, and I want to thanks for that. Back at the picture there, I have been following the news, which the people built that wonderful, huge Cuban flag, more than 25 meters, and it's amazing. It looks amazing, and I can't wait, honestly, to go and see it physically in person, hopefully soon. And also, so glad to see my dear friend John Oswald from the University of Minnesota, and a senator, and all of you. As you know, I born in Cuba. I grew up in Cuba. I did all my musical career in my country until I get my both a PhD there. And but even during my student career, specifically in 1979, I was like a boy, probably like a 13, 14 years old. I got the first opportunity to travel out of Cuba. I was part of the delegation. We play several concerts at what we know, in the 1970s and 80s and 80s as the Soviet Union. And right from that very first time, I started to realize like we didn't even have to speak their language, or they didn't even have to speak Spanish to get in some kind of communication. I got a privilege to be even conducting by one of the greatest Cuban musicians in that time. It's Somavilla, and I was playing the Rhapsody in Blue of George Gershwin. Since that, I travel all my life, and I have been seeing the same thing. And one of the most important things I have been seeing it all around the world, and including the first time I came to this country, to the United States, was in June 1996, which, making a quick parenthesis there, you won't believe it, the first stage I played for the first time was the Orgway for Performing Arts in St. Paul, Minnesota. What a kind of great coincidence. Thanks God for people like me was in the month of June and not in the month of January, so that I didn't have an opportunity to feel that 30 below at the very first time I came here. But right away, I'm sorry, I start to realize and see physically, how in general the people of this country love Cuba, and specifically what a great connection was in between Minnesota and Cuba, which you probably don't know. And this is an information a few years ago when Aurora and I got the opportunity to even invite our ambassador, Jose Ramon Cabañas, to Minnesota for a big show we did called A Night in Havana. We gathered information even back to the 1800s. Antonio Maceo, which is what was one of the leaders with Jose Marti. Even Maceo came to visit Minnesota. So the relationship in between the state of Minnesota, the people here, and Cuba is pretty much now for centuries. I really don't want to take it so much time. I know that there's another more important panelists want to talk, but I want to say in another webinars I have been the pleasure to participate. I always like to make a question, because it is no doubt we are all very happy, to listen like Cuba. It is doing fantastically fine and great with the fight of the pandemic. It is so glad to hear from our ambassador Lianys, like even yesterday we didn't have a death. It is amazing. Always, from here, from our house, always we like to send, the condolences to all the people who have been losing some people, some friends, some people in the family. Has been touching actually those too. I have been losing very close friends in Cuba too. But it's amazing to see how the country has been for more than 62 years under one of the hardest and the brutal blockades, has been fighting, and has been actually been one of the most the physical clear examples for the world. Like it even under this kind of brutal blockade has been able to go over that and always protect their people, and not just their people. It is actually offering this humble collaboration in all around the world. It is my acknowledgement. Actually, Cuba right now, that is even sending vaccines to Nicaragua, to another countries. So my questions is always, my question is always the same. You know, it is, what should we do to continue to support this, to continue to let the world know like it is important. And I don't think we have to create anything because the proof are clear. You know, the proof are clear right there. Why to continue to include Cuba as a country that is supporting the terrorism, which is completely, for me, I'm sorry, that doesn't make sense. That's completely insane because the proof is real. Cuba is one of the countries with the most biggest group of medicals or doctors, engineers making collaboration all around the world for decades. I got the opportunity myself, and what I am talking today to all of you is something I have been seeing with my eyes. For 3 times, I got an opportunity even to go to Angola, Africa, and see what Cuba was doing there with the doctors, with the teachers, with the engineers, even people of construction. So it is so much proof we got to let the world know, like that's not true. Cuba is supporting the terrorism. What else we can do? Because I am a little disappointed with our dear president, Joe Biden, because a few weeks ago, he got an opportunity to listen one side of the Cubans living in the United States. I don't think he has been given the opportunity to the other side of Cuba, for example, like me, or for example, like Aurora, which we are professionals. We are people that study in Cuba. My wife, Aurora, is a lawyer. She is a graduate from the University for the School of Law of the University in Havana, Cuba. So I think it would be great if eventually we can get the same opportunity these other people got on the White House to explain them what the physical and clear proof we have, like what has been happening for more than 62 years doesn't make sense. I think it is time to let the world know, like even in terms of law, they are blockading, they are stacking the American rights to fly free to Cuba as the same way they are doing it to other countries, even are living under the same political system as us. Like, for example, to Vietnam, to China, you know, why Americans can go simply flying just to get in a ticket and then go and visit those countries, and why they cannot go to Cuba, why Americans cannot go and invest in business there. For me, it doesn't make sense. We are very close. As you know, we have been living here for almost, well, for 20 years already. And something made me feel very happy. It's like every time I go to the concerts all around the United States, to all my performance, I can see, because lots of people come to us and transmit to us like how much they love my Cuban people. I think we cannot sleep on that. I think we should continue to show the world like Cuba has professional people are definitely willing to continue to show the world like this doesn't make sense. Like what is happening is completely insane. And I am not a good person talking about myself, but unfortunately, today I think is one of the few days or few times I have to do it. As you know, in March 28th, 2020, I started to get these kind of symptoms, stomach ache and things like that. And that ended up of myself being admitted at the St. John Hospital in close to the city. I live here in Maplewood, Minnesota. Right when the doctor admitted me there, and actually that was a Venezuelan doctor too there. They came out to the parking lot and talked to my wife. They gave me barely 3 hours of life. They didn't have the whole entire conditions there to keep me alive. The only thing for them was to try to get me stable, and they contact the hospital of the University of Minnesota. And thankfully, you know, all people there, they have a bed ready for me there. They said, bringing it, we are ready. And they start to work it right away to bring me to life. When I get to the hospital in Minnesota, I was already in coma. I was in coma for 14 days. Something I don't think and I have to feel 100% grateful of it, but it looks like I was the first patient of the University of Minnesota Hospital, the #1 to survive out of an ECMO program. I am so glad to have friends like, my friend John Oswald, and also the director of ECMO program in Minnesota, Dr. Melissa Granswold, which really nice coincidence. She back from Cuba just 3 days before I get admitted on the hospital. So I got pretty much saying in some way the privilege to get connected to ECMO by the director of the program coming from Cuba. And then with the whole connections, our dear friend, the Ambassador Jose Ramon Cabañas, started to make it with my wife. Also, a team of doctors from Cuba started to work. And my wife was pretty much the bridge information in between the doctor of Minnesota and the doctor from Cuba, because unfortunately, once again, we have to say it again, because the embargo, we couldn't even bring, or they couldn't even bring a delegation of doctors to work physically here. But specifically, my dear friend, Dr. Tanya Crombet, and her team start to get so much information from my medical history. My wife and my daughter always send it to them to Cuba, and they start to make this kind of collaboration until 14 days later, I back to life. So I think it is clear, the proof, like the professional level of our doctors in Cuba, the same the professional level of doctors we have here. Just a few days ago, when we still touring, I was watching the news, like even Dr. Tanya Crombet now that is working with a group of doctors at the university in New York, and they are continuing to work with this vaccination to save life of people out of lung cancer. It looks like they have 10 candidates now, 10 patients actually at the hospital of Hermanos Almeidas in Cuba, and looks like things are going, very well. I think, this is way enough proof to the world, like doesn't make sense to say like Cuba is supporting the terrorism, because no, not at all. Cuba is supporting the life. Cuba has been supporting, the reestablishment or the relationship in between these two wonderful countries, which I know I have the proof from all people work in politics and all the people of Minnesota and United States. They love our country, and I always told to everybody, when they ask me, specifically from some people haven't been in Cuba before, and I always told them the same thing. The only thing you have to do is get on the plane and go to Cuba, because I am not the perfect person to ask, what do I see or what do I not see in Cuba? Because for me, I know it's a lot to do. I know it's a lot to work with, but Cuba for me, it is the country I grew up. I think we owe so much from our country, and I think it is the time to pay back. And I am not talking about money. It is time to pay back to Cuba the education we get there. Thanks to the education we get there, I have been able.
Nichito, it's kind of, we need to move on to the other speakers, and I really
I'm sorry.
I appreciate everything you're saying. I mean, I think it's really important that you're framing what's so important for us to learn about Cuba, and especially your personal experience with healthcare. So thank you so much for.
Oh, thank you so much for the invite. I'm sorry, coming from the education in Cuba, sometimes I'm practicing.
Yes, right. I know.
Go, but thank you so much to all of you. Thanks so much to my dear Ambassador, for Senator Sandy, and I hope we can definitely meet together in person sometime. And thank you, John, for being here. Thank you for saving my life at the university.
So thank you, and thank you for your music. Makes me happy. So I am going to introduce our next speaker, who is, I want to make sure I get his name, Kevin Pat, and I'm sorry. And he's president of the Minnesota Farm Bureau. And I learned from him that he's a 4th generation corn and soybean farmer. His farm is in southern Minnesota, and he's farming with his children, his son and his grandson, and he's in his 16th year as the State Farm Bureau president, and he also is on the National Farm Bureau Board and Trade Advisory Committee, and they have done many delegations or worked on delegations with Cuba. So with that, I'm going to introduce Kevin Pop.
Well, thank you for that introduction. Can everybody hear me? Somebody give me a thumbs up.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. As was mentioned, I'm a corn and soybean farmer. You know, and as farmers, we learn at a very early age from our father, or quite frankly, our grandfather many times, that it's important to work with your neighbors. You know, in farming and ranching, it's important to work with all your neighbors, and some you work with more than others, but probably the most important neighbors in agriculture are your closest neighbors, those that are very close to you and your farm and your family. And we know in agriculture, we certainly know in the Farm Bureau, that good trade relationships make our world a much safer, a more stable place. You know, that we don't want barriers to export the food that we can deliver to those who need it. We know that open markets, rules-based, negotiated trade agreements, that working together works. And I've had the opportunity to visit Cuba as far as one of the trade missions with Lieutenant Governor Smith, now Senator Tina Smith, as well as visit the Cuban embassy many times in Washington, D.C. to have some of those folks actually visit our farm here in southern Minnesota. And from an agriculture perspective, we want to be at the table. We want to be engaged in the discussions about how we can work with all of our neighbors across the world as far as international trade. But certainly Cuba, which is only 90 miles away, that does need to import a percentage of their food, we would like to be helpful. So from the agriculture perspective, for those farm families that grow the food and care for the livestock, for the food for our country and the rest of the world, we'd like to be part of that process. So just appreciate the opportunity to be part of this important discussion, and we'll be happy to answer any questions when we get to that part of the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Agriculture has been so much a part of the connection between Minnesota and Cuba, and so it's good to hear from you and the work of the Farm Bureau and you. So thank you very much. And our next speaker is Sandy Pappas, Senator Sandy Pappas. And Sandy has been in the Minnesota State Senate since 1991. And before that, she was in the Minnesota House of Representatives. She was the former president of the Senate, and she's made 3 trips to Cuba for government and elected officials. So she has a chance to both explore Cuba, but also explain Cuba to people from Minnesota. And she's the author of legislative resolutions in the Minnesota legislature to enhance the connection between Minnesota and Cuba, but also to end the blockade and to support healthcare collaboration. So Sandy, it's your turn. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy, for that introduction. And thank you to the Cuba Committee for inviting me to join the program this morning. And I do want to do a shout out to Nachito and ask if he remembers when he was performing with the Minnesota History Theater, he actually did an event at my home and played for a small group for a fundraiser for the History Theater. And I remember you taking a walk along the Mississippi River to relax and get ready for your performance. So I don't live there anymore, Nichito. I live downtown now, downtown St. Paul. At any rate, as Marcy mentioned, I actually was very interested in, when I first was elected, in what was going on in Central America. And I did a human rights trip to Central American countries like Nicaragua and El Salvador and later Honduras. And I thought, well, it'd be very interesting to go to Cuba because there's such heavy propaganda in our country against Cuba. And I'd really like to see for myself what's going on there. So working with the Augsburg Center for Global Education and with the Martin Luther King Center on the ground in Cuba, I did organize trips in 2000, 2002, and 2003. So it's been almost 20 years now since I've been there. And these were designed professional development trips for elected officials and government officials, because that was who I was aiming to influence and be able to have that first on-hand experience. Then I have to say, I think I might have been partially responsible for getting the first Minnesota governor and ag commissioner to go to Cuba, and that was Jesse Ventura. If those of you from Minnesota probably remember Jesse. And we basically brought him cigars and showed him pictures of old cars. And he went. He did have an audience with Fidel, which sometime offline asked me about the story about Jesse and Fidel Castro. So I've been interested for a long time. I am trying to go again, bringing elected officials. I have a group so far of about 10 that are interested in going. We are planning to go over Thanksgiving this year, but because of COVID, because of issues with currency, because of literally food shortage issues in Cuba, the Augsburg Center, they were having issues with their on-the-ground partner, asked us to postpone a year. So I'm excited to hear that Marcy and others are going now, but my group has been postponed a year. As Marcy mentioned, I have taken the lead on both resolutions on normalizing relations, on having exchanges, agriculture exchanges, people-to-people exchanges from Minnesota. And also more recently in 2020, we really brought to Governor Walz's attention the relationship between the University of Minnesota, as John Oswald will talk about, and Michael Osterholm, and the Cuban medical establishment, and the collaboration that has taken place there. And that we could really learn from that collaboration, learn what's happened in Cuba. There's a lot we could learn from what Cuba's done. I mean, I just remember stories about when, after the fall of the Soviet Union and the cancellation of a nuclear power plant in Cuba, Cuba literally imported 1 million bicycles from China. And they became much more of an organic approach, organic agriculture, and a more natural approach to medicine. They have a huge homeopathic industry there. As well as the work they've done with the University of Minnesota and more traditional path. So I'm excited to be going back again. I'm sad I have to wait a year, but I hope to continue to follow what's going on there and to join their programs. And I'm excited to see that Cuba film on climate change. There's a Minnesota delegation that's just ending. Yes. I think it ended yesterday, the climate conference. And I hope some of them got to see the film, and I hope that it becomes available for us to see in Minnesota. Thank you all, and I look forward to the rest of the program and to joining you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandy. And I wanted to mention something about the resolution. The Minnesota resolution is actually, we're the leader nationally for a state have introducing a resolution, but around the country, there have been 49 resolutions introduced by cities, by counties, by states, and by labor unions. And that those 49 resolutions encompass 41 million people. So there is a lot of support communities and different groups around the country that for ending the embargo and for having healthcare collaboration. So thanks, Sandy, for taking the leadership on that. I'm going to combine the next two speakers. Because they're going to be talking sort of in tandem. They are Teddy Potter and John Oswald. Teddy Potter has a PhD and is clinical professor and coordinator of the Doctor of Nursing Practices in Health Innovation and Leadership at the University of Minnesota. And she's the first director of planetary health for the School of Nursing. I love that name. So, and she's really concerned about the health of our planet and climate change. And John Oswald has a PhD in public health, and he's on the faculty of the Minnesota School of Public Health in epidemiology and community health. And he's been really involved on collaborations with public health professionals in Cuba. So I'm going to let the two of you sort of decide how you're going to do your presentations together. They both were part of the collaboration at the University of Minnesota that has been talked about with Cuba. And so they can explain that to us. So thank you, John and Teddy.
I think
So-
I'll start out and then I'll bring John forward. So thank you for inviting me to be here today, and it's an honor to be at a shared event with Ambassador Rivera. The healthcare system in the United States is struggling, and this started long before COVID, but has escalated since the start of the pandemic. We need a more equitable and sustainable model of care delivery. And being a nurse, I am willing to look anywhere and everywhere for best practices that will ease the suffering of our people. I won't rest until we have a better system. This passion led me to Cuba. Through an organization called MEDIC, I've been able to travel and bring people to Cuba 5 times. Why Cuba? Because it's the most spectacular healthcare system I've ever seen. Where most high-income countries promote an illness care system, Cuba's system is a true healthcare system. I bring students, faculty, and healthcare administrators and leaders from Minnesota and beyond to see Cuba and be inspired by what is possible for healthcare in Minnesota. We can't build what we cannot see. And by seeing it active and live in Cuba, we are able to imagine what is possible for Minnesota. And here's a unique story about the degree of connection between Minnesota and Cuba. One of the faculty that I brought to Cuba in March of 2020 was Dr. Melissa Brunsvold, who ended up managing the care team that saved Najitos Herrera's life. So this connection, we are interconnected in the work that we're doing. The result of this long-term partnership is that the University of Minnesota will be signing a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, with the National School of Public Health in Havana, Cuba. This MOU will support further education and research partnerships. Dr. John Oswald will now discuss some of our research initiatives and our shared scholarship.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Yes, just very briefly to share a few of the specific projects that we have had. Really, in the area of healthcare, the first major initiative was in maternal and child health, particularly with infant mortality, maternal mortality. And I should say that that was developed in 2015 and 2016. And really during that era of the Obama administration, working constructively with the leadership in Cuba, and that provided a backdrop for support of our maternal child health program with support of the Obama administration, and certainly support of the governor then in Minnesota, as well as community public health agencies. And some of our learning, especially around disparities and equity in maternal mortality, have been really valuable to us. And we've heard that other lessons have been very helpful to leaders at MINSAP, their Ministry of Health in Cuba, as well as our key partner, the National School of Public Health of Cuba. More recently, of course, the absolute #1 priority has been COVID-related research. And of course, the case of Nachito was, so widely shared in our community through television and newspaper. And I should say that was one of several, but a very visible motivation for us to focus on COVID-related research. Up on the chat should be a link to the video of, or Zoom, not the technology to access two video conferences that we had with leaders in Minnesota, leaders in Cuba. If I have to put a particular plug in, look at the first 15 minutes of the first video, in that it was a combination of our leader in, at least academic research leader in COVID research, Michael Osterholm, together with Francisco Duran, of course, the really remarkable leader of epidemiologic research with COVID and of course with all of epidemiology in Cuba. And then, of course, where are we going in the future? Well, that's where to continue the biomedical sciences related research. And the focus initially is on the elderly. We did have a previous really exciting project that got cut short in 2017 on aging. Aging was an area that we were hoping to pursue. And it was in particular in Santa Clara, which was, there was sort of a sister public health association relationship between the Twin Cities, both Minneapolis and St. Paul, with Santa Clara. And of course, the birthplace of our best musician in all the Twin Cities, Nachito Herrera, is Santa Clara. And, but that led to, how do we tie that to COVID research? And so the field of immunosenescence, which is where immunology and aging research, and of course, the issue of aging having the highest age group of COVID deaths, not infections, but COVID deaths. So keep a lookout for immunosenescence or immunology and aging research. And of course, our partners in the Center for Immunology and Molecular Research in Cuba, that's part of the remarkable biopharm technology umbrella organization, which produces such worldwide respected research. And as far as other research, finally, we hope to broaden to a university-wide. Of course, there's outstanding research going on in areas of race and ethnicity, in areas of other types of aging, other types of maternal child health. And then, of course, I have to emphasize agriculture as well. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you both. The collaboration that Minnesota has done as a model nationally for other states and for other people across the country. And John and Teddy were very important in the development of that collaboration. So we really appreciate your talking to us today and the work that you've done. The next speaker is Ofunci Radema. And Ofunci is a Cuban American Babalawo from the Yoruba religious tradition. And with that, I'm going to have Ofunci talk, and he's going to have a wonderful interpreter from Spanish of his daughter. So with that, we can go to Ofunci.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak about Cuba. My daughter will be interpretation for, because there are many Spanish speakers following this event. So for me, it's very important. My people, please. So, gracias por darme la oportunidad de estar con ustedes.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be with you.
Y voy a tratar de ser lo más breve posible.
And I'll try to be as brief as possible.
Para los que me conocen, saben que yo hablo directo, sin temor a nada.
For those who know me, they know I speak directly without fear.
Estoy en contra de cualquier manifestación que atente contra la soberanía de los pueblos, específicamente en mi país, Cuba.
I'm against all forms of protest against the sovereignty of the people, especially in my country of Cuba.
Entonces, en días pasados,
So in past days,
estuve participando en una conferencia en la Universidad de Minnesota
I was participating in an event in at the University of Minnesota,
y trataré de simplificar lo que dije allí.
and I would try to simplify what I said there.
Número 1. Vivimos un momento histórico complejo en el mundo
Number one, we live in an historic moment in the world that is complex,
y donde no tenemos tiempo para estupideces y mediocridades.
where we don't have time for stupidity and mediocrity.
Es una lástima que, por ejemplo, se está organizando para el día 14 una manifestación frente a la Embajada de Cuba en Washington, D.C.
It is a shame that, for example, on the 14th, a protest in front of the Cuban Embassy in Washington, D.C. is being organized.
Por supuesto, la disidencia para hablar basura y tergiversar la información con relación a mi país.
To speak badly and twist the information of my country.
Eso nos da la medida de cuánto enfoque hay para desestabilizar la soberanía de Cuba.
That gives us a measurement of how much focus there is to destabilize the sovereignty of Cuba.
Pero vemos otro gran grupo
But we see another large group
dentro y fuera de los Estados Unidos que sabemos todo lo que hace el gobierno de Cuba para su gente.
in and outside of the United States that knows everything that the government of Cuba does for its people.
Voy a hablar con humildad, pero me puedo dar el lujo, el privilegio de contar un poco mi trayectoria, muy breve, para que me puedan entender.
I will speak humbly, but I also have the luxury to speak
Mi trayectoria.
from my trajectory so that you understand.
Soy defensor de los derechos humanos
I'm a defender of human rights
de años sobre años
for years and years.
y he tenido la oportunidad de ser testigo
And I have had the opportunity to be a witness
de golpes de Estado en Centroamérica,
of coups in Central America,
como en África, como tener la oportunidad de estar entre los más pobres del mundo, salvando vidas.
to be in Africa among the poorest of the world, saving lives.
Pero ¿qué sucede con eso?
But what happens with that?
La gente se le olvida
People forget
que Cuba fue el primer país, o sea, los primeros hospitales en África subsahariana fueron aportados por Cuba.
that the first hospitals in Africa were Cuban.
Entonces, como decía en la Universidad de Minnesota, está aconteciendo un gran problema ahora.
For example, right now there is a big problem
Que la juventud o muchos de los jóvenes que se han involucrado de manera errónea en la disidencia desconocen conceptos.
that a lot of the young people who have gotten involved in the dissidents don't understand the concepts.
Y cuando digo disidencia es que se introducen en grupos sin entender conceptos.
When I say that, I mean that they introduce themselves to groups without understanding the concepts.
Si miramos a Cuba,
If we look at Cuba
como país del tercer mundo,
as a third world country,
el término de pobreza cabe.
the term of poorness fits.
Pero desde mi punto de vista,
But from my point of view,
que he visto de todo en muchos de los países que he estado,
that I have seen everything in all of the countries I've been in.
en Cuba no hay pobreza.
In Cuba, there is not poorness.
En Cuba hay escasez.
In Cuba, there is shortage.
Y esa escasez parte desde el punto de cuando se te quita o se te prohíbe los suministros. Esa escasez proviene cuando no tienes acceso a nada.
And that shortage comes when you don't have access to things.
Por tanto, este gobierno
For example, this government
durante años tras años ha ahogado, ha asfixiado a Cuba.
for years and years has drowned Cuba.
Por tanto, al no tener acceso a nada
So not having access to anything
o cualquier suministro que venga del exterior sea bloqueado
or that anything that comes from the exterior is blocked
por la política de los Estados Unidos,
from the politics of the United States.
ahoga o asfixia al pueblo.
It drowns or asphyxiates the people.
Por tanto, aquí el enfoque, no se puede hablar de Cuba,
So we can't speak about Cuba.
nadie puede hablar de Cuba
No one can speak about Cuba
sin mencionar la palabra bloqueo.
without mentioning the word blockade.
Hay un bloqueo que ahoga a nuestro país.
There is a blockade that's drowning our country.
Y entonces existe esa contradicción de muchos jóvenes
So that contradiction exists among many young people
que te hablan de hace 60 años,
that speak about 60 years ago,
cuando en 1989,
when in 1989,
en el histórico discurso de Fidel Castro en Camagüey,
the historic
discurso de Fidel Castro
event of Fidel Castro in Camagüey,
Camagüey,
Cuba,
el 26 de julio,
the 26th of July,
él habla
he speaks
sobre la posibilidad de la desaparición del campo socialista.
about the disappearance of the socialist camp.
Y a partir de ahí es que se agudiza el bloqueo en Cuba.
And that, from there is where the blockade comes.
Recuerdo que fue en la década de los 90 uno de los momentos más difíciles que vivimos en Cuba.
I remember the decade of the 90s, one of the most difficult we've lived in Cuba.
Y donde Cuba renació como un ave fénix de su ceniza,
And where Cuba was reborn like a phoenix,
porque no fue ahogado,
because it was not drowned,
ni será ahogado.
nor will it
Jamás.
be drowned ever.
Entonces mi punto es
So my point is
que aquí en Minnesota,
that here in Minnesota,
por ejemplo,
for example,
hay mucha gente,
there are a lot of people,
afroamericanos,
African American,
blancos,
white,
indígenas,
indigenous,
que apoyan la revolución cubana
who support the Cuban Revolution
y que saben lo que está aconteciendo allí.
and who know what's happening there.
Y como lo demostramos cuando el asesinato de George Floyd,
And how we demonstrated it after the assassination of George Floyd.
también hay muchos grupos aquí que estamos dispuestos a tratar de cambiar la política de los Estados Unidos hacia Cuba.
And there are a lot of groups here who are trying to change the politics between the United States and Cuba.
Me decepciona
It disappoints me
lo que acontece desgraciadamente en el sur de la Florida.
what happens, unfortunately, in South Florida.
Tenemos personas maravillosas allí,
We have amazing people there,
pero
but
Biden ha traicionado la confianza no solamente de nosotros los cubanos sino de los estadounidenses.
Biden has
Traicionado.
betrayed the confidence of the people of the United States
Porque se ha prestado para esa manipulación que recibe de los supuestos demócratas del sur de la Florida.
because he has given himself to
Del sur de la Florida. O sea, que los demócratas traidores del sur de la Florida son los que le manipulan la información a él.
he has been the information he has gotten has been manipulated by the Democrats of South Florida.
No tengo miedo de decirlo.
I'm not afraid to say it.
Trabajo a nivel internacional.
I work at an international level.
Trabajo con el Congreso de los Estados Unidos.
I work with the Congress of the United States.
No nos cansamos.
We do not get tired.
Y prefiero preguntas y respuestas
And I prefer questions and answers
y dejarla aquí ahora.
and
Por
to
razones
leave it
de
here
tiempo.
now for reasons of time.
Gracias a la embajadora por darnos la oportunidad.
Thank you to the
De hablar cara a
ambassador
cara.
for giving us the opportunity to speak.
Gracias a Nachito, a todas y todos.
Thank you, Nachito, and everyone.
Lo que les puedo decir
What I can tell you
que tenemos un trabajo, un arduo trabajo, un gran trabajo.
is that we have a lot of work.
Por eso mi hija está interpretando para mí.
That is why my daughter is interpreting for me.
Puedo estar solo aquí,
I could be alone here,
pero ella tiene la experiencia de Cuba.
but my daughter has the experience of Cuba.
Ella conoce Cuba
I know Cuba.
y yo honro la tierra que me vio nacer.
And I honor the land that saw me,
Y los ancestros también.
and the
Thank you so
ancestors
much.
too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really wonderful. Thank you, Ofunci. That was a wonderful a last speech for this event, because it's really important to emphasize the blockade and what's happening in Cuba now. That's not that's the US interfering and trying to make changes that aren't good for Cuba, and Cuba needs to have its sovereignty. So thank you again. And I want to thank everyone who's spoken today. It's just been a fantastic group of people and wonderful things to listen to. So we have time now for questions and answers. The ambassador needs to leave at 11:30 Central Time and 12:30 her time. So particularly if there are questions for her, we can keep going with the speakers with questions and discussion. But if there are any questions, I'll ask the two question managers, Kim and Sarah.
Yes, actually, we don't have any questions, but there is a statement here that actually could probably be clarified, and it has to do. So put your questions in chat or submit them to Facebook. So if you have any, now's the time. And it was an incredible presentation and such important information to have at this time. This one has to do with the vaccine, the Cuban vaccines, and with the World Health Organization certification. Ambassador or anybody else, do you know where the Cuban vaccines are in that process for World Health Organization certification? They certainly have been in Cuba and have proved effective. So, and there are 3 of them, as has been said.
I answered the question by the chat. By written, but it's okay. It's okay. I can repeat the answer. Well, the documents to apply for a certification in the WHO has been already submitted by Cuba. And it usually takes some time. We have to say that, maybe months, for the WHO to issue a certification. But it is important to clarify that what the WHO certifies is a vaccine, is the use of those vaccines by the WHO programs. but the authorization for a vaccine is granted by the national regulatory authority. In the case of Cuba, as you know, SEDMED, and that already happened with 3 of our vaccines that I mentioned before, out of the 5 original vaccine candidates we had. So in reality, the Cuban vaccines have been proven to be effective, as you can see from the decrease of cases that I already mentioned. And Mercy and Sarah, if you allow me, I would like to talk a little bit about what I think it was Senator Pappas who,
Yes.
Who talked about this documentary about the climate change that was shown at the COP26 climate change summit in Glasgow. Well, let's see. I cannot promise. We will try to see if we can have the documentary and arrange something with Minnesota. But because I know now that our dear senator talked about that, I know that many friends in Minnesota have been interested in exploring ways of collaborating in this matter. I just want to recall that it was Fidel Castro in 1992, almost 30 years ago, that he clarified and state our position on this issue of climate change when he said an important biological species is at risk of disappearing due to the rapid and progressive liquidation of their natural condition of life, man. And in Cuba, we have something that we call a life task, which is the program for our country to tackle climate change. It is a broad and ambitious plan led by the Ministry of Science, Technology and Environment that was approved in April 2017. As I said, to face climate change in our national territory through adaptation and mitigation measures. Many Cubans knows about that. It is our response to our national goals and international commitments. It is based on rigorous scientific and environmental studies, and the main objective is to protect human life and its quality. If Minnesota is interested, and we could share experience based on the life task on this matter, and of course we will try to arrange something for the documentary as soon as we have it.
Great, thank you. We did try to get one of the Minnesota delegates who were at COP26, and I was communicating with him, but he wasn't able to be on this call. So hopefully in the future we can have somebody from COP26 and to see the film and to really have a discussion about Cuban response to climate change. So Kim, do you have more questions, or Sarah?
I have one that was directed to Senator Pappas. Senator Pappas, what can we do with Senator Klobuchar to influence the U.S. Biden's decision on Cuba policy? She and her office have been silent on this issue.
Yeah, I was unaware that she was silent. I thought that she was a supporter for a long time of normalization of relations. So I can certainly contact her office to clarify her position if it's changed, but you know, she's been to Cuba. I think she could be influential with Biden. So we definitely should pursue that angle.
Yeah, I think probably be more outspoken at this point, because President Biden hasn't lifted the Cuban policy about embargoes. So I think, I know she's been supportive, but maybe be more out there to get this policy changed. So I think that's where that question was going.
Great. Well, let's talk more about how to pursue that offline.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Mercy.
Are there other questions? Oh, yes.
Mercy, you allow me, I want to thank again the panelists here, our friends, who has expressed such a strong commitment for better relations with Cuba, and also against the blockade, which is, and I have to stress this situation. The blockade, it is the main obstacle for the development of Cuba, and it makes Cuban people suffer and our life, daily life, more difficult every day. So I just want to thank you for this position of the panelists here and the Minnesotans in support of our struggle against the blockade. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for being here with us today. And are there other questions before we can? I know that you need to leave in just a couple minutes. So are there any other questions before the ambassador has to leave, or for other people too in the panel? Any?
Sorry, there is a dear colleague letter being promoted by,
Yes,
for you to know, by Representative Jim McGovern, Barbara Lee, and Gregory Mix and Bobby Rush. It's public now. So,
yes, and we will try to advertise that on our Facebook page, and I think probably the Minnesota Cuba Committee will do it as well. Because it's an important thing for us to be contacting our congressional delegation to tell them that they need to support that dear colleague letter that basically is asking President Biden to change his policies. So
I would just like to add our sincere appreciation to the ambassador for attending this session, and especially for the idea of a Minnesota-Cuba collaboration day or event
yes,
at the Cuban Embassy in Washington. And I think that can be a great opportunity to pull in key influencers, decision makers, to communication that maybe otherwise wouldn't be facilitated. So thank you so much for today, and for we look forward to working with you on the kinds of communications that you're describing for the future.
you are all welcome.
But I just want to say that I would definitely love to be part of the group of a Minnesota Day at the Cuban Embassy, and if it's possible, I would love to. If you still like it, you don't have to like it, but I would love to bring a piano and play some music for all my friends there, and be part of this Minnesota group going to Washington, D.C. It is going to be a pleasure and an honor. So please don't forget about us. We are always, we got our Cuban suitcases ready to go to Washington, D.C. and New York ready there, which is untouchable just when we go there. So I hope to be part of that too.
You are welcome, very welcome.
So I have one question for Ambassador. La pregunta es si el actual gobierno de Biden ha tenido un acercamiento oficial con la embajadora como lo hace con cualquier embajador de.
So the question is if the Biden administration has interchanged with the ambassador of Cuba like it does with all the other countries.
Porque eso nos daría un punto de partida para poder entender hasta qué punto la política bloquea internamente también a la embajada de Cuba.
Because that would give us an understanding of how the government also blocks from the inside.
Ofunci, voy a responder en inglés y tu niña, que es bella y es una excelente traductora, te lo va a decir en inglés. ¿Está bien?
Go ahead. No
Okay.
problem.
Okay. Well, Cuba and the US, we have diplomatic relations. And since we have diplomatic relations, we have been having contact, but only for the daily business of our embassies. We're talking about visas and things like that. But there haven't been high-level talks or any kind of talks regarding bilateral topics that we might be talking to. For example, we have 22 MOUs or agreement that were signed during the Obama administration that are still in force, and nobody's talking about that. Cuba is ready to talk on the basis of respect to our sovereignty and to our independence, to the US, about any topic that is worrisome for them and for us, and about any topic of bilateral interest. We are ready, but we at this moment we haven't been talking about anything other than what I said before. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So are there more questions before we?
Only one question for everybody. I need to understand what is the Zoom meeting today. Probably my voice is not good, but it's a lot of work, a lot of talking. I'm sorry. But my question is for everybody, for the world, not for you guys. How long is a 245 restriction for Cuba? How long? How is the another country for this situation in the world? This is my question for you. Where is the people respond for me? I am so tired for a lot of time in Cuba's situation for people not understand very clear what is the situation for my people. My people, I need to stop the cruelty. This is
Yes.
what happened. The human body, this is more important in the world. I am listen a lot of people talking the Cuban not respect the right for civil right. What happened for the civil right now for 245 restriction for Cuba? What is the people respond in another country? What is the another country in the same situation for Cuba right now? Probably I am not understand. This is my preoccupation for today. I'm sorry for introduce this question, but it is so important for me. Listen for you guys. You represent the good people in the world. For fire, for the civil rights, and the senator, the politician, the doctors. The priority in the world is the human body. Whatever the people is respond for me, this is open, the question for you guys. I don't know, this is important. Respond for a lot of people, question in my phone. Why not talking for the restriction, 245 restriction for Cuba? It's criminal. I'm sorry. And thank you so much for your participation in the webinar. And probably I need more for this one. And different state for stop not talking for the politician, talking for human body, please. This is my question, a special question. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, because that is the frustration of this keeps going on and on and on, and nothing seems to be getting better from the United States point of view. I'm not talking about the Cuban point of view, but the United States keeps kind of oppressing more and more. And so I think if anybody wants to answer that question or talk about their response to it, it would be great. Anybody in the audience too, so. I don't know. I think nobody knows how to answer that, but.
My humble opinion. Yo pienso que no es Estados Unidos.
I don't think it's the United States.
Pienso que es el gobierno de los Estados
I think
Unidos.
it's the government of the United States.
Yes, that's right, yes.
Entonces, estoy muy agradecido que la bella Ochun, Aurora, hizo esta pregunta.
I'm very grateful that the beautiful Shun Aurora asked that question.
Porque el pueblo se pregunta hasta cuándo vamos a admitir lo que está aconteciendo.
Because the people ask, how long are we going to admit what is happening?
Nosotros somos ciudadanos americanos.
We are American citizens.
Nosotros no hemos renunciado ni renunciaremos la tierra que nos vio nacer.
We have not renounced, nor will we renounce the country that saw our birth.
Por tanto, tenemos una responsabilidad
So we have a responsibility
como ciudadanos
as citizens
de exigirle a nuestros congresistas
to speak to our congressmen,
a nuestros senadores,
to our senators,
no cansarnos,
not get tired,
seguir y seguir,
continue and continue,
porque somos la mayoría que
because
estamos en contra de ese cruel bloqueo.
we are the majority that is against the cruel blockade.
Les voy a compartir algo que quizás mucha gente se moleste conmigo.
I will share something with you that a lot of people might not be happy with,
Pero no me importa.
but that does not matter to me.
Pienso que dentro de la población estadounidense, dentro de la minoría estadounidense,
I think that in the US population, in the minority,
los cubanos, hablando en sentido figurado,
the Cuban, talking figuratively,
han llegado a un punto donde gran parte del sur de la Florida hay un conflicto entre sí.
have gotten to a point where a lot of the people in South Florida have a conflict within themselves.
A lo que yo le llamo como babalao,
That I call as a babalao,
el síndrome del mosquito.
the syndrome of the mosquito.
El mosquito nace y se desarrolla en un charco. El mosquito nace y se desarrolla en un lugar de agua, un pequeño.
The mosquito is born and dies in still water.
Pero ¿qué hace?
But what does it do?
Cuando nace, vuela, infecta en otro lugar.
When it's born, it flies and infects other places.
Por tanto, nosotros tenemos que ser capaces
So we have to be capable
de utilizar la estrategia de la hormiga,
of using the strategy of the ant.
trabajar en coalición,
Work in coalition.
pequeña pero conoce el secreto.
Small but understands the secret.
Y cada una tiene su función,
And every one of the function.
pero trabajamos en unión.
But we work in unity.
Por tanto, si nosotros somos capaces,
So if we are capable,
con el respeto que no hemos ganado aquí dentro de los Estados Unidos y fuera de los Estados Unidos,
with the respect that we have gained here in the United States and outside of the United States,
nosotros tenemos la capacidad
we have the capacity
de enseñar
to teach
que el pueblo de Cuba necesita que este cruel presidente elimine esas órdenes ejecutivas solo con su firma.
that the people of Cuba need that this cruel president take away the restrictions just with the sign of his name.
Pero para eso tenemos que ahogar e insistirle a nuestros congresistas.
But to do that, we have to insist to our congressmen.
Esa es una respuesta.
That is a response.
La otra respuesta
The other response
es que nosotros tenemos que ser capaces
is that we have to be capable
de reflexionar de cómo con Obama se pudo ver el cambio
of
en
how,
Cuba.
to reflect of how with Obama we were able to see change in Cuba.
Los mediocres te hablan que la remesa va para el gobierno.
The mediocres say that the benefits go to the government.
Los inteligentes
The intelligent
decimos, esa remesa es para ayudar a nuestra gente de a pie.
say that those benefits go to our people.
Como lo hace cualquier país del mundo.
How any other country would do it.
Entonces, si nosotros somos capaces de tener este tipo de meeting,
So if we are capable of having this type of meeting,
tenemos que ser capaces de transmitirle a nuestra gente que no tiene acceso a este tipo de meeting,
we have to be capable of transmitting to the people who don't have the opportunity to be in this meeting.
comunicar,
Communicate,
hablar
speak
de manera transparencia.
in a transparent manner.
Como yo le digo a mis hijos,
How I tell my children,
si yo te quito la comida,
if I take away your food,
te quito tu desayuno
I take away your breakfast
y tus privilegios
and your privileges
que te pertenecen,
that belong to you,
¿qué sucede?
what happens?
Te me mueres de hambre,
You would die of hunger.
caes en una crisis
You would fall in a crisis.
y es lo que hace este gobierno.
And that's what this government does.
Por eso separo gobierno con pueblo.
That's why we have to separate government and people.
This is my humble opinion.
Thank you very much, Ofunci, and that kind of summarizes it for us. So I want to, the ambassador has to leave, and so I want to thank her for being with us today for the whole time. And it's been great to have this discussion with you. And we're looking forward, all of us, to coming to the embassy for Minnesota Day at the embassy. And we all need to keep working. We need to triple the work we're doing to end the blockade and to change US government policy. So this has been really important for people to hear this and to talk about this. And I hope that people have given us your email address when you registered for it or on Facebook so that we can keep in contact with you about the important work that needs to be done. And join any of the 3 groups that I mentioned at the beginning, or all 3 of them, to make sure that you're involved in solidarity work with Cuba. So I'm gonna ask the people from Kim or Sarah or Carla if there's anything else I need to say or we need to say before we go.
I was just going to say, we've had a couple of car caravans in the city, and we will not be doing it this month, but did we decide to do it in December, I think? Anyway,
Yes,
we will
yeah.
get, yeah. And this is part, as Carlos knows, part of a national effort to end the blockade. And actually the biggest one was in Miami, and they met with considerable violence, actually. We don't in this city, but so in December, we will have another car caravan. So
Right.
watch for that on the Minnesota Cuba Committee page or the Solidarity Committee page, and join us. They're really good. They're really good. People in the community really respond to our
So,
efforts, to the message.
Ambassador, did you want to say anything before you, I know you need to leave, so.
I just want to thank you once more for being here, for your words, and for the support of our struggle against the blockade, and for the support of the Cuban people. And be ready for the Minnesota Day in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
Minnesota Cuba Day in Washington, D.C. All of you
Okay.
will be very welcome. And especially
Okay.
the translator, the young translator that Ofunci had.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
I just want to say that the other important thing is that people actually know the history of Cuba and why the American government wants it to fall. And it really comes down to the different economic systems, helping people or profit. So we can choose either or. And so that's really important. And the other thing too, is that if in the Zoom chat, and I'll put it in the Facebook chat too, we have an email address you can write to us. I know some folks are not from the cities, and I really appreciate everyone joining too. So just give us an email or write to us with our email, and you can join one of our meetings. We usually have them on Friday mornings, and then we can definitely see if we can get people connected to their groupings, if there's any groups. And if not, then we can encourage people to start their own.